Joe Pucci. I'm a principal at Alliance Bernstein and president of your library board of trustees. And it's wonderful to see such a packed house tonight. Thank you for coming out. It's my privilege to welcome our honoree, Ron Chernow, and all of you to our 18th Booked for the Evening. I promise a night like no other at the Westport Library. Tonight is a night of many firsts. It's the first time we've sold out, and 2 full weeks before the event. And that's thanks to all of you here, and I'm sure there's a few others who would love to have been here tonight. I guess life does imitate art, where it is impossible to get tickets to the library's signature fundraiser to honor the author of Alexander Hamilton. It is the first time we've had 3 Sapphire sponsors. Thank you, Paula and Tom McInerney, Jocelyn and Walt Durandrian, both of them longtime supporters of the library. And thank you to our lead corporate sponsor, Thomson Reuters. Our platinum sponsors are the Ashkin family, Rondi Charleston and Steve Rachevsky, Stephanie Erskovic and Brian Foster, Allison Hoffman and Kevin Rakin, Ronnie and Joelle Molinari, Tracy and Anil Narang, Trammy Wynn, and Michael Guadarrama. We also want to express our thanks to all of our generous sponsors whose names are listed in the programs you have. And I also want to express our grateful appreciation to the Booked for the Evening Committee, led by its chairs Candace Savin and Wendy Brown. Main committee members Martha Austin, Stacy Bass, Laura Cohen, Cindy Eigen, Deanne Feldman, Julia Genzer, Lori Gertz, Lucy Johnson, Melissa Kane, Maggie Mudd, Tracy Narang, Nina Sankovic, Trish Schwartz, and Diane Sembrot have an outstanding program planned this year. And a very special shout out to our stage manager, Cynthia Gibb, and her assistant, Laura Pendergast. Special thanks to the incredible library staff who've been slaving away and changed this magical space into Party Central tonight. And by 9 a.m. tomorrow, they'll have this all cleared out and functional again as a working library. So really amazing work you all do. So isn't our library amazing? And you all here, you're the reason. You have challenged us, you have inspired us, you have made us into one of the best libraries anywhere. Your generosity enables us to present over 1,600 programs each year and to welcome over 1,100 people each and every day. It's an honor and my pleasure to serve on this board, and especially this year as we celebrate another first. This year we welcome a new executive director in July, Bill Harmer. This is his first book for the evening. Bill has worked tirelessly hard in his first year and shows great promise to be one of this library's great leaders. And please join me now in welcoming Bill to the stage.
Thank you so much, Joe, and good evening, Westport. Welcome to our first ever sellout of Booked for the Evening. This is my first book program. I'd like to take all of the credit for this sellout, but I think you all know that the credit goes to our honoree, Ron Chernow. I would be remiss if I didn't invite us all to give another round of applause for everyone that Joe mentioned that put this program together for us this evening. 10 months ago, I moved my family to Connecticut from Michigan and began my role as the executive director of the Westport Library. Now, rumor on the street is that so far I've passed the audition. It was a big decision for my family and I, but I am so glad that we made it and that we're here. I cannot tell you how impressed I have been with our patrons, with our board of trustees, the staff, and all of the community organizations and their members that I have gotten to know. The Westport community has exceeded my expectations in every way. We have a wonderful program planned for you this evening. The book program committee, led by our chairs, Wendy Brown and Candy Savin, have created something very special. And we have an exceptional guide in our moderator, the extraordinary James Naughton, who is generous with his time and his talent. In addition to being an internationally acclaimed performer and two-time Tony Award winner, Mr. Naughton is also a Westport treasure, fully committed to our community. But I'm going to digress for a second and address something briefly that has been on my mind, on the library board's mind, and I'm certain on the minds of many of you as well. It's exciting news, and as we have so many library enthusiasts in the crowd tonight, I feel compelled to share it with you. And what I'm referring to is our library's transformation project. When I arrived in Westport just 10 short months ago, we paused the project briefly to give me an opportunity to get to know Westport and to reassess the project's goals and priorities, as well as the resources available to get the project done. The library's transformation project represents a bold vision to transform this outdated facility into a 21st century library with much greater flexibility that will better serve our community and its many ever-changing needs. Over the past several months, together with our talented architect, Henry Meyerberg, who's with us tonight, we have reimagined the project's design so that the transformation can be accomplished within the shell of the existing building and its current footprint. This revised design meets all the project's essential needs and will contain the cost at an affordable level and enable us to get this project over the finish line as quickly as possible. In late April, the library board unanimously approved these revised plans, and we can now envision the finish line with confidence and a sense of excitement. So we don't plan on being quiet about this for much longer. We look forward to sharing these designs with you and telling you so much more about our plans in the coming months. And together, we can assure that the Westport Library will remain one of the best libraries in the country, but demonstrate leadership in library design as well. So, what do you say we get on with our show? Take it away, as they say.
Hi, I'm John Meacham, and I'm a member of a group called the Ron Chernow Fan Club. There are very few people who are as good at what they do as Ron. He has written monumental books about George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, J.P. Morgan, really explaining the country and how it came to be politically, economically, culturally, and very few people, really in the history of American letters, have had as enduring an impact as Ron has had. It's an honor to be Ron's friend, and congratulations to you on the Westport honor, and I hope that before the evening is out, you will in fact rap.
I was born in Brooklyn. And then I went to Forest Hills High School in Queens.
You know, in my case, I knew from the time that I was a teenager that I wanted to be a writer, but I thought I was going to be a fiction writer.
I did a BA in English at Yale College, and then I did an MA in English at Cambridge University in England.
I did 2 degrees in English literature, and I never took a single history course. The reason being I was always taking a course in the novel, usually the 18th or 19th century novel. Better or for worse, everything that I've written about has been self-taught. But when I got out of school, I started working as a freelance magazine writer, but I was always scribbling short stories, nights and weekends, which never got published, but I persisted in that error for many years. All of the years that I had spent thinking about narrative, you know, the basic elements of fiction, whether it was voice, pacing, point of view, portraiture, etc., all of it flowed quite naturally into biography.
Morgan got a streak of romanticism, a streak of morality, and even a certain crusading streak that would be very important in his life.
What is it about you and business, then?
Well, you know, I always tell people that business history is really the bastard child of the profession. There's much more prestige in writing about politics or diplomacy. And I find these businessmen, they're kind of large, almost Shakespearean figures in their passions and the dramas of their life. And so I always tell people if it was just about business, it wouldn't interest me. It's really the synthesis of business, politics, and culture. Instead of telegraphing where I end up on Rockefeller, I tried to let his life unfold so that the reader would actually be reproducing the sense of adventure and discovery that I had in doing the book. Hamilton was actually something of an exit strategy because I knew that there would be a very large financial dimension, obviously, with Hamilton, but it would lead me into constitutional law, it would lead me into foreign policy, and I think that with each book, you have to try to expand your range as a writer, otherwise you go stale.
I think now we actually know so much more about George Washington than his own contemporaries. I dare say we know more about George Washington than Martha did.
I had hundreds, maybe thousands of eyewitness accounts, and it really made me feel that I could possibly do what has been so difficult for biographers to do with Washington, to bring him alive as a fully three-dimensional character.
I wish I could be with Ron Chernow and all of you at the Westport Library today. Ron has also made significant contributions to Penn, as we know. He was president of Penn in 2006 and 2007. He's worked in the Poets and Writers in the Schools program, which sends writers into the underprivileged inner city communities of New York to teach students. And he served on a number of committees there, and he is a real, I can say this without reference to gender, he's a pen man.
I think that from the time that I was young, my love of literature, I can see when I look back, was simultaneously love of history. And the novel in particular being the vehicle that transported me back in time. There is something distinctive about what I've done as a biographer. It's that there's a literary sensibility. And so I think that any history student should minor in English literature, and English major should minor in history because they form a perfect fit.
American history was short, but it was so dramatic and so colorful that you have to work very, very hard to make it boring.
Well, welcome to Westport Library's Book for the Evening. Tonight we honor Ron Chernow, and I'm lucky enough to count Ron as a friend. So it does give me great pleasure to be a part of this celebration of him as an author, a humanitarian, and an historian. An historian from whom we can learn many lessons, not only about the past, but also, sometimes unfortunately, about the present. To honor a piece of Mr. Chernow's past, I am pleased to introduce, to start us off, the Duke's Men, renowned Gale a cappella group, here tonight to serenade Ron with a song from his alma mater, the Duke's Men.
shortest years with pleasure write, the shortest, gladdest years of life. How swiftly are ye gliding by! Oh, why doth time so quickly fly? The seasons come, the seasons go, the earth is green or white with snow. But time and change shall not avail to break the friendships formed at Yale. In after years should troubles rise to cloud the blue of sunny skies, how bright will seem through memory's haze those happy golden bygone days. Oh, let us strive that ever we may let these words our watch cry be, whereupon life's sea we sail, for God, for country, and for Yale.
You see that, my illustrious friends? You've already gotten a laugh. Let's hope it's not the last. I welcome you all tonight to the very first Westport Booked for the Evening debate. We have on our stage, yes, please, go right ahead, 5 illustrious VIPs from American history, all of whom share a key characteristic. They were the subjects of biographies written by Ron Chernow. Tonight, using Mr. Chernow's own written words, these 5 men will debate the issues of their times and of ours. Men, all 5? I say men, yes, all 5. Are you ready? Remember, your responses must come from the pages of your biographies. Stick to Ron's words, and we are sure to come away enlightened, with a new appreciation for the way in which the lessons of yesterday apply to the problems of today. We will begin by allowing each of our historical figures a moment to introduce themselves. George Washington, if you could get us started, just as you did so famously in 1776. President Washington is, of course, the star of Ron Chernow's Pulitzer-winning book aptly titled Washington, A Life.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I will be brief. I am a man unerring judgment, sterling character, rectitude, steadfast patriotism, and with an unflagging sense of duty and moral civil-mindedness. Furthermore, I am able to subdue the underlying volatility of my nature and direct my entire psychological makeup to the single-minded achievement of a noble cause. Enough said.
And now, second in line, sir, you with the very lovely scarf. Would you please introduce yourself?
Alexander Hamilton. My name is Alexander Hamilton, and there's a million things I haven't done, but just you wait, just you wait. Alexander Hamilton.
Thank you, thank you. Next time, you could talk less, smile more. Pierpont Morgan, you are next. Ron Chernow told the story of your family's banking dynasty in the House of Morgan. Let me just say, He was right on point when he described just how similar in looks you are to your father. Yeah. The bald pate, the bulbous nose, the pear-shaped frame.
The point I'd like to make is simple. I typify, as my father did before me, the sound, old-fashioned banker whose word is his bond and who seals his deals with a handshake. Oh yes, there are detractors out there who see us Morgans as hypocritical tyrants who bully companies, conspire with foreign powers, and coax America into war for profit. But no one can deny the story of our family and our firm as a prism through which to view the panoramic saga of Anglo-American finance.
John D. Rockefeller, we'd like to hear from you now. Mr. Chernow's biography of America's first billionaire is titled Titan, The Life of John D. Rockefeller Sr. In that book, Mr. Chernow describes you as an implausible blend of sin and sanctity.
And for that keen observation, I thank him. Previously, my biographers had either portrayed me as the devil himself or a savior who rescued American industry from an early grave. Mr. Chernow, perhaps more than anybody, sees me as the incarnation of the capitalist revolution that occurred after the Civil War and transformed American life. According to him, I embodied all the virtues of thrift, self-reliance, hard work, and an unflagging enterprise.
He also, I believe, underscored in his biography how you routinely flouted government and ran roughshod over competitors.
Well, Mr. Chernow once stated that he liked to write about us dead people because we don't talk back, we don't sue, we don't have angry relatives. Guess what? I'm here to talk back.
We have one more important historical figure to introduce on our stage tonight. Paul Warburg. Welcome. Ron Chernow tells your family's history in his book titled The Warburgs.
My family assimilated enough to enter the upper echelons of society in Hamburg, New York, London. But we were never wholly accepted. This enabled us to combine an outsider's perspective with an insider's entree. As a Jew in the Gentile world, a German immigrant confronting a new country, I was able to spot flaws in American finance to which native bankers had been blinded by its familiarity. I had a gift for prophecy, a special radar that detected social and political fragility. I spied the hairline cracks in the facade of economic life that portended later collapse. I viewed the world through a filter darkened by my own depression, and saw problems perhaps hidden to happier souls.
But Mr. Warburg, I thought Mr.
Yeah,
Chernow
can I butt in for a
described
moment?
you Warburgs as glandular optimists.
Optimists, yes. But life has also required a certain amount of realism. And for me, much disappointment. I created the vision and wrote most of the legislation for the Federal Reserve Act, which brought stability to the financial markets. But when I was nominated to sit on the Federal Reserve Board in 1914, I was repeatedly attacked for being a Jew, a German, a banker, and an alien.
An alien? Well, look,
wait.
we're not going to talk about immigration just yet, Mr.
Can I
Warburg.
butt in for a moment? I've always been acutely concerned about the poverty that accompanied immigration, and I contributed huge amounts of money to black ministers, churches, orphanage, and I never relinquished a special solicitude for the black welfare, and that was quite atypical for a businessman of my time.
Gentlemen, please allow me to lead the debate tonight. The issues you're raising are interesting, but I would like to focus on one of the central issues raised by the biographer you all share, and a question of perennial importance to Americans. Let me start with Mr. Hamilton. Sir, how do you see the role of the president and the role of the federal government?
Notwithstanding my preference for a strong president, I applaud many checks on presidential power to protect the country from a president corrupted by foreign ministries I approve of the requirement that presidents obtain 2/3 of the Senate to enact treaties. In a similar vein, I approve of the presidential power to appoint Supreme Court judges, subject to Senate confirmation. You see, I am as quick to applaud checks on powers as I am to applaud those powers themselves. Checks and balances are necessary to ensure freedom and order. And in the final analysis, I believe the federal government, not the states, is the best guarantee of individual liberty.
What you are most famous for, Mr. Hamilton, is the creation of a strong central bank. A bank that, after the War for Independence, assumed all the debts of a new nation. Why was that so important to you?
Well, for starters, it was more efficient to have one bank assume all wartime debts. Since then, there would be one overarching scheme for settling debt instead of many small competing schemes. My plan for one central bank also reflected a profound political logic. I knew that bondholders would feel a stake in preserving any government that owed them money.
Oh, speaking of money, you spent quite a bit paying off the husband of your paramour, Mariah Reynolds. And then you wrote about it. Well, in my day, we kept our libido in check, our checks in our wallet, and we kept our mouths shut.
Oh, in your day, you wouldn't have had a day to count your dollars or a bank to put them in if not for me. And I didn't do it for you. I didn't create the National Bank to enrich creditors or cultivate the privileged class. I did it to ensure the government's and our country's stability and survival.
Mr. Warburg, you also favor a strong central bank. How does your position differ from Mr. Hamilton?
Well, in my time, we suffered through the panic of 1907. We realized the reforms of the bank system were necessary, and I pushed for a central bank that issued uniform national currency and discounted commercial paper. But bowing to political realities, I wanted to make concessions for the more public control of the banks. Their popular mistrust of the banking fraternity was at the height. A swelling chorus condemned Wall Street, which supposedly manipulated American finance. J. Pierpont Morgan was the arch enemy.
Ah, who are you calling an arch enemy? Ah, I saved the United States and its economy again and again. In 1893, a one-year-old company by the name of General Electric faced failure. I rescued it. And thus ensured GE's future loyalty to the House of Morgan.
Mr. Morgan, I'm sorry, but...
He mentioned me by name and I have a right to respond. Yes. The 1907 panic was my last hurrah, but within 2 weeks' time, I saved several trust companies and a leading brokerage house, bailed out New York City, and rescued the stock exchange. A panic spread, and as it spread, I took charge. Emergencies seemed to fortify my confidence, even as they introduced doubt and terror.
I others promised half of all I possessed to maintain America's credit during the panic. Don't you dare accuse me of terror or doubt. I provided more money, private money, than anyone else.
Before my time runs out, can I just mention my art collection? I love art. Art raises my spirits. And I put together the largest art collection of any private individual of my day, perhaps any day. It had Napoleon's watch, Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks, Catherine the Great's snuff box, jewelry of the Medici family, Shakespeare's first folios, a 5-page letter of President Washington.
Mr. Morgan, this is all very fascinating, I'm sure.
My nephew, Edward Wahlberg, founded the Museum of Modern Art.
My son Nelson sat on its board. Heck, I gave away $500 million to start major institutions. Perhaps you've heard of the University of Chicago, the Rockefeller Institute, the Rockefeller Foundation.
See, I prefer to be generous but discreet. You won't hear me talking about what I've done for the American Ballet Theatre, the Juilliard School of Music, the Tuskegee Institute, or the Loeb Classical Library.
I believe my name was mentioned, Mr. Moderator, sir.
Mr. President.
Back when Mr. Morgan was speaking.
Mr. President, you have the floor.
challenge all of you today here to improve your performance as citizens, to cling to the Union, with the federal government as the true guarantor of liberty and independence. To resist those combinations and associations that seek to counteract the constituted authorities. Political parties can become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people. Political parties are not so much expression of popular politics as their negation, denying the true will of the people. But whatever my chagrin about partisan strife, I have sought, and no one should ever seek to, I have never sought to suppress debate or clamp down on shrill opponents. The American political system can manage political tensions without abridging civil liberty.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. You have been most thorough. And thanks to all of you tonight. Through the words of your illustrious biographer, Ron Chernow, you have helped us understand your positions, as well as your lives, your times, your inner selves, and your outer personas. Now, if each of you would like to wrap up.
Well, speaking of rap. War is hell, I'm here to tell. The food to eat, men had cold feet. Not enough hail, I left my son hail. Ron Chernow knew I was the one to write about. Hamilton's alright, what's all the fuss about? When I led the fight, his name's in bright lights. And mine, on the bridge, it just ain't right.
I left my island, that much is true. I was not voted off, it's what I chose to do. My head on a 10 or my name in lights, I don't care, you led the fight. All I wanted was to be the next president. Wish I'd rethought that Second Amendment.
I'm the baddest banker that you ever did see. Gonna raise your rates if you mess with me. I may be old, hey, I'm even dead. But my banks are still here and still making bread. Ron, I got ideas about how to make a show. For funding, you can always use my dough. With my art as your backup, and my name on the marquee, margins only have one way to go. Whoa.
Well, I'm on fantasy status and high finance, but my real passion is song and dance. You may have read I'm a brute, but Ron, he knows that I'm the dude. You don't think that I can jump or jive. I wrote this rap in 1925. I was taught early to work and hard to play. My life has been one long holiday, full of work, full of play. Ron, take that shoe to old Broadway.
Sit down, you twit. Stop throwing a fit. We're tired of your blather and your bluster. Time you met with Teddy Roosevelt, the great trust buster. Broadway for you? I think not. More likely somewhere wrapped in old footstock. Turn you loose on the Great White Way? Not on your life. You'll be fracking in a day.
How's a boy from Brooklyn, Forest Hills, and Yale somehow absolutely failed to take a class in history? I say it's a mystery. Now he's master of history rhymes, an expert in olden times. His books about founding fathers and all that jazz. Hip to nuance and filled with pizzazz. Chernow rocks us to the core with his knowledge about the ones that went before. Tonight we celebrate the man of the evening, Westport Library's Book for the Evening.
massacre. I witnessed their deaths firsthand. I made every mistake. I felt the shame rise in me. And now I'm lying here awake, thinking history has its eyes on me. History has its eyes on me. Yeah. I remember what I wish I'd learned when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? I know that we can win. I know that greatness lies in you. But remember from here on in, oh, history has its eyes on you. History has its eyes on you. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Every other founding father story gets told. Every other founding father gets told. But when you're gone, who remembers your name? Who keeps your flame? Who tells your story? It's only a matter of time. They tell her story. Lives who dies, who tells her story. They tell her story. Lives who dies, who tells your story.
That was just too much fun. I can't rap, but as you have seen tonight, there is no debate about how much enthusiasm for history can be created when the story is told by Ron Chernow. With the skills of a novelist and the searching mind and discipline of an historian, he has captivated us with the tales of these exceptional people. His engaging and accessible biographies have all been bestsellers while garnering numerous prestigious awards that attest to both their historical merit and their literary verve. Through Mr. Chernow's books, we are asked to consider central questions of our existence as a republic. How, as Americans, shall we organize our lives and regulate our livelihoods? How shall we allocate our freedoms and responsibilities? How do we maintain ourselves as one nation, always seeking a more perfect union? These are issues of history that remain relevant and urgent today. Ron Chernow's biography of Alexander Hamilton sees the imagination of Lin-Manuel Miranda, a wonderkind of contemporary American theater. With Mr. Chernow as his historical consultant, the Broadway phenomenon, Hamilton the Musical, was born. Essentially, one creative New Yorker inspired another, and together they teamed up to resurrect from obscurity a third New York dynamo, Alexander Hamilton. Now this founding father is a modern-day celebrity, stirring the passions of audiences that had no idea they could ever love history this much. 20,000 of New York City students are discovering that American history is populated by scrappy, ambitious, energetic, and yes, flawed people. In other words, people like a lot of us, who set out to serve their country and remake their world, and did. What better inspiration? Can you imagine what will be unleashed when high schools across the country start putting on their own productions of Hamilton? Move aside, Oklahoma. Look what a well-told story can set in motion. Finally, I want to salute Mr. Chernow's long and active leadership in the PEN American Center. Their mission to take up the cause of literature, defend free expression, and foster access to the views and ideas of others is a set of values by this library, by this community, and by me. Mr. Chernow is a perfect match for the Westport Library Award, which honors an individual whose work reflects the purpose of the library, to nurture the love of learning and to enhance our understanding of the world. Mr. Chernow, thank you for making history come alive. We, the people, are grateful to you for it. Now please join me on stage to accept the Westport Library Award. The podium, sir, is yours.
Thank you so much. I am not only honored, I really am deeply touched. I'm quite frankly bowled over by this evening. I've never been honored in such a beautiful and imaginative way. My deepest thanks to Bill, to my friend Jim Norton, to these magnificent actors. And I must tell you, it's a very strange sensation to have suddenly seen my own characters come back to life. It's my recurring nightmare that when I pass into the afterlife, the first thing that I'm going to see is kind of an angry swarm of people coming towards me, and I'm going to say, oh my God, it's Washington, it's Hamilton, and they all surround me like in a posse and start saying, you got this wrong, you got that wrong, It was also great fun to hear the Yale Glee Club. They did a beautiful rendition, didn't they? From the show. And it was interesting because the first song they sang is "And the Yaleys in the House Know Bright College Years." And the summer after my freshman year at Yale, I wrote a god-awful and thankfully unpublished novel entitled Bright College Years. My very difficult first year at Yale. And there's a line in that song, for God, for country, and for Yale. And I remember years back, Dick Cavett said, what can you say about a university whose motto is for God, for country, and for Yale? And he was upset about the order of billing. Anyway, this is a great night in many ways. Thank you all for coming. I'm thrilled at the large turnout. I think a lot of you know I have very extensive connections with the Westport community. That two of the very dearest people in my life, Ann Chernow and Martin West, live here. Ann is a marvelous artist, has lived here since 1968. She's an amazing woman. She's been creating fantastic art for decades, inspired by movies of the 1940s and still going strong. And Martin, retired Hollywood actor, now director extraordinaire of documentaries, has done 2 documentaries related to Westport history. One was about artists over the age of, did profiles of 50 artists over the age of 70, and did another one, Gathering of Glory, about the Westport art scene since 1900, and they're both available here at the library with the Artist Archive. You see, I did work in a plug for the library. So and then I should also mention my cousin, Bert Chernow, my first cousin, who also, of course, moved with Ann to Westport in 1968, had a profound influence on this community because it was Bert who started what's now the Westport Public Arts Committee. Bert and Ann went around to artist studios, got them to donate works, and I'm now told by Ann that there's now $5 million worth of original art on the walls of Westport libraries and schools and public buildings, and I'm very proud to say that goes back to my first cousin, Bert. So the Chernows have done very well for Westport, and Westport has done very well for the Chernows, so thank you. Now, you all know I've been running around with this very cool, hip Broadway crowd, and I know you're curious about that. So I'm going to tell you the story of how I met Lin-Manuel Miranda. Okay, go back to November 2008. I'm out taking a constitutional one day in my neighborhood in Brooklyn Heights, and I ran into my friend Gara, whose daughter had gone to Wesleyan with Lin-Manuel Miranda, and it was this life-changing conversation. Because Gara said, you know, my daughter and I were friends with this hip-hop artist, as he referred to Lin, this hip-hop artist, he said had read my Hamilton biography and had become obsessed with it and wanted to meet me. So they put me in touch with Lin. He was still starring in his first show in the Heights, which he was 25, 26, he won the Tony for Best Musical. Invited me to a matinee. I was very captivated by the show. I went backstage. Actually, it was the same theater, Richard Rogers Theater, where Hamilton is now. And I said to him, so I gather my book made an enormous impression on you. And Lin said to me, you know, Ron, I was reading the book on vacation in Mexico, and as I was reading the book, hip-hop songs started rising off the page. And I said to him, really? It was not, shall we say, a typical reaction to one of my books. And I'm glad we have that picture of him floating there, you know, in Mexico with the book in the swimming pool. He then started saying to me, he said, you know, Ron, Hamilton's life is a classic hip-hop narrative. And I was thinking to myself, what on earth is this guy talking about? I think that Lin very quickly sized me up as a kind of a world-class ignoramus about hip-hop. And I said to him, because I could see right away that he did not want to do something satirical or outrageous about Hamilton. If I had sensed that, I would not have been eager to cooperate. But I could see that he wanted to do a serious, complex, dramatic rendering of Hamilton's life. And so my first question for him was, Lin, can hip-hop be the vehicle for telling this kind of complex story? So he said, Ron, I'm going to educate you in hip-hop. He saw that I needed educating. And he pointed out a number of things that to this day are very important about the show. Number one, he pointed out with hip-hop, you can pack an enormous information into the lyrics because you can pack more words per measure into hip-hop than any other musical form. In fact, the show, I think, is 20,000 words. They did a word count of Lin's part as Hamilton, and his part as Hamilton has more words than any role in Shakespeare other than Hamlet. So it's actually a longer role than Lear or Othello or Macbeth. Incredible. The other thing that Lin pointed out was that there's an enormous amount of rhyme. There are rhymed endings. There's a lot of internal rhyme in hip-hop, and there's a lot of wordplay. And boy, does Lin love wordplay. And so for those of you who have not seen the show or heard the cast album, who may have the same sort of associations that I had with hip-hop, that it's going to be something rather cold, violent, misogynistic, rather harsh. Instead, this show, as you could hear from the Glee Club, the show is, the music and the lyrics are very poetic, they're very pleasing, they're maybe closer to the wit of the Cole Porter than what you would think of when you associate it with hip-hop. In fact, I feel that part of the power of this show and its significance is I think that Lin has transported us back to verse drama, the verse drama of the ancients, the verse drama of the Elizabethans. The audience, their amazement, are sitting there listening all evening to rhymed couplets and rhymed quatrains, and it's an absolutely delightful sensation. Well, so what happened, Lin asked me on the spot, I was amazed because I just met him, he said, do you want to be the historical advisor? And so I left and I said, do you mean you want me to tell you when you got something wrong? And he said with great fervor, he said, yes, I want the historians to take this seriously, which of course was music to my ears, and he's really made good on that. And I should say, my job as the historical advisor, you know, I immediately started shooting off my mouth about the portraits of the characters, the relationships, the dramatic arc, even, you know, shoot off my mouth about casting. None of these things were officially in my job description, but Lin and the director, Tommy Kail, never said, no, Ron, you can't comment on that, you know, because you're just the historical advisor. And so I was very intimately involved every step of the way, even just, you know, in the last 6 months. I mean, I sat in on the recording of the cast album. They let me sit in with the orchestra under the stage for performance. I decided I'd never been involved with a show, that I was going to have every experience that one could have with a show, and I have, and it's been fascinating. Anyway, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 months after I met Lynn, he called me up. He said, "Can I come over to your house? I want to sing something for you." He had just finished writing the first song of the show. He sat down on my living room couch. He started snapping his fingers, and this is what he sang. "I was a bastard orphan, son of a whore, and a Scotsman dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean by providence, impoverished in squalor, grew up to be a hero and a scholar." Well, I mean, as soon as he sang that, I've on numerous occasions told Lynn that I am available. For some unfathomable reason, he has not taken me up on the offer. His only missed call, at the casting. But what I noticed just, in that first stanza, by providence impoverished in squalor, as an old English major, I was just enthralled by this. I had never heard such rich, heightened language before, in Broadway show lyrics. Okay, and then the second stanza, "The $10 founding father without a father got a lot farther by working a lot harder, by being a lot smarter, by being a self-starter. By 14, they placed him in charge of a trading charter." Well, that's kind of very slangy 21st century. It's very kind of colloquial speech. And Lynn's genius is that he manages to create this unique idiom in which he has one foot in the 18th century, very standard formal English, and the other in 21st century slang. And somehow, as filtered through his amazing imagination, it all comes out sounding natural and of a piece. Now, I didn't understand, when he first started saying Hamilton hip-hop narrative, I really didn't understand what he was talking about. But I did over time, and as I heard what he was writing, because as he wrote each song, he would send me the song by email, and I would just hear Lynn alone at the keyboard, and he would send them to me with these psychedelic screensavers. It was really weird. But as I, heard what he was writing, and as then I began, going to rehearsals, that I could see that this was a tremendous inspiration on his part, because there's something about the very dense, rapid lyrics of hip-hop that fit perfectly with the portrait of Hamilton that Lynn paints, which is of an intense, driven, frenetic character. And that intense, frenetic character and these dense, rapid, lyrics, they mesh perfectly. It was really an inspired insight. I'm a little slow on the uptake. It took me time to see it, but it was really an extraordinary insight. In fact, the hip-hop in the show is so intense. There was a moment, I'd say maybe 4 years ago, where Lynn and Tommy, our director, decided to bring in a young Latino playwright as the librettist. A librettist in this instance meaning the person who wrote dialogue, so that this show was initially going to be a more conventional Broadway show in the sense that it would be song, stop, dialogue, stop, song. So, we've got song, dialogue, throughout. But what Lynn felt was that every time the songs ended and the dialogue began, the energy would seem to go out of the show. So he made a very courageous decision, I think the single most important decision in the creation of the show. He said this is going to be wall-to-wall music. Everything is going to be completely sung through. So I think that there are 46, 48 separate songs in the show. Now, the hip-hop has gotten the most attention for a variety of reasons. I mean, certainly the novelty of it, and also about 40% of the show is hip-hop, but there's also jazz, soul, R&B. Quite frankly, there are a lot of songs in the show that are just Broadway, beautiful Broadway show tunes. But I asked Lynn one day, I said, Lynn, how does one even begin to create the musical voice of the founding father? Because every founding father, or mother for that matter, in the show sings in a different musical style. So I said, where do you even start with that? This is what he said. I was flabbergasted. He said, okay, Ron, in the show, Hamilton is the youngest of the founding fathers, so he sings in hip-hop. Thomas Jefferson was 12 years older than Hamilton, so he is someone of a slightly older generation, so he sings in jazz. George III was slightly older than Thomas Jefferson, so he sings in this kind of Beatles Sgt. Pepper style. So he had taken all of these founding figures and he had matched them up with contemporary musical generations, and that's how he put the show together. I mean, it would have taken me 100 years to have seen that, but that was the wonderful mind of Lin-Manuel Miranda. And you know, everyone in the show kind of picked up this contradiction that it was simultaneously the 18th century and the 21st century. So our wonderful musical director, Alex Lackmore, doing the orchestration, created a 10-piece band. They're under the stage, you can't see them, but it's, as Alex describes it, a cross between a string quartet, two violins, viola, cello, as a guitarist, and then on the other side of the orchestra, there is heavy metal bass and all of these percussion instruments. And so there are moments where you're listening, you hear pizzicato, you hear these different effects that might be 18th century chamber music, and then there are other times where it's just, you know, very, you know, hard driving, pulsating rock, but somehow, again, it all flows together. And then Paul Taswell, who was doing the costumes, Paul created these beautiful period costumes with a little bit of kind of 21st century chic and sexiness, but our director, Tommy, came up with this dictum that every character on the stage was going to be 18th century from the neck down and 21st century from the neck up. Which again is a fantastic idea, because you look up on the stage, you know, and there's Betsy with her chopped platinum hair, and there's Sasha with her afro. You know, from the neck up, they look like, you know, young people walking by outside the theater. They're kind of a cross-section of, you know, hip young New Yorkers. And at the same time, they're all in period costumes, singing this in this very unique idiom that Lynn has created. Now, as strange as it sounds, all the, you know, that long period, maybe at least a couple of years, 2-3 years, where Lynn was sending me songs, and we were having lunch and talking about Hamilton psychology, I did not really think of the casting. And I think to the extent that I thought of the casting, my frame of reference was 1776, which probably a lot of you in the audience, that was our idea of a musical about the founding fathers, was a bunch of late middle-aged white guys, you know, with buckle shoes and wigs and powdered hair. Okay, so there came a day where Lynn sent me an email and said, Ron, I'm working with actors for the first time, and I'd love to have you come and listen. So I remember it was late on Monday afternoon. I went up to a tiny little rehearsal studio in the Garment District, and I very gingerly opened the door, and I peered in, and there indeed was Lynn with 8 actors standing in front of 8 music stands. And the first thought that went through my head was, oh my God, they're all black and Latino. Luckily I didn't blurt that out, but I can remember being sort of shaken up, and I sat down, and the only other people, aside from the actors, there was Tommy, the director, Jeffrey, the producer. So I can remember sitting down and saying, when everyone has left, I'm going to take Lynn, you know, sit down with him. We're talking about founding fathers in the United States. So I sat down, and then I was watching my own reaction, because they started singing. My first reaction, of course, was these were the most glorious voices I'd ever heard in my life. And then a couple of minutes after that, I suddenly noticed I'd stopped noticing what color they were, what ethnicity they were. And then I started to think, oh my God, you know, I've never heard any group of actors or singers capture the passion and intensity and idealism of the American Revolution, the way this young black and Latino cast was doing it. It's like within 5 minutes, I went from worrying about this to becoming like a stark raving militant on this issue. And it was sort of more than colorblind casting. It's kind of color casting, you know, with a statement. And it's been such an important part of the show, and they are all so extraordinary. And, you know, I've done a lot of interviews with people who said, well, what's this whole phenomenon about? Why such a sensation? And there are a lot of different answers to that. But one of the things that I found myself saying, even before he came to the show, I kept saying that this is Obama's America. You know, back in 2008, when Obama was elected the first time, I remember reading an analysis of the election that said that by 2008, 40% of births in the United States were people who identified as African American, Latino, Asian American, or biracial. The figure projected to go up to 50% by 2040, when the minorities, what we call minorities now, will become the majority. And there they are on the stage of the Richard Rogers Theater. And the great news, what an extraordinarily, talented, vibrant, interesting generation this is, in a way that I had not realized at all before I became involved with the show. And it's been, the great thrill for me has been just seeing my book very faithfully turned into the show. The very close second has just been getting to know these cast members. And on some level, they have approached this with such reverence. The first time that I met Leslie Odom Jr., who plays Aaron Burr, he said to me, this line that just stuck with me, he said, "Ron, now my people get a piece of the story." There's a really deep urge to identify with the mainstream of American life. Chris Jackson, who so brilliantly plays George Washington. Chris not only read my Hamilton book, he's read my Washington book at least 3 times. He took his family down to Mount Vernon. They have all approached this with such kind of respect and deep reverence and a feeling of being, again, incorporated into the mainstream of American history. The show is showing us simultaneously who we are now as a people and who we are then. It's taking the story of the past, telling it through the sensibility and style of the present, and making American history accessible, particularly to young people, in a way that it has never been before. I think every historian biographer would say the same thing. We felt we were kind of missing the kids, we were missing the students, and Lynn has this magical connection with every one of them. It's so important. It's so great. And I always felt that when it came to Hollywood or Broadway doing American history, they always were kind of talking down to the audience. There was always like an unspoken assumption, this is really better, this is dull stuff. If we're doing the Revolutionary War, we better have cannons going off every 5 seconds, or muskets fired, or women with, Muslim women with low-cut dresses, something, because otherwise the audience is going to nod off. Lynn realized the most dramatic way to tell the story was just stick to the facts. As I was quoted in the tribute there, saying, you have to work pretty hard to make this stuff boring. Lynn realized he didn't need to invent anything. He just needed to capture the story. And I really feel that instead of talking down to the audience, he has sort of lifted the audience up to another level. This is a very entertaining show, but it really is a very erudite show. This is really American history for grown-ups. It's entertaining, but it's also immensely erudite at the same time. Let me just briefly talk about, the portrait of the period in the show. I always thought there's both a good reason and a bad reason to idealize the founding era. The good reason is it was an era of philosopher kings. The first census in the United States was in 1790. It showed the population was 4 million people. 4 million people, be about the combined population of Brooklyn and Queens, or maybe a little bit larger than the population of Chicago today. In that population of 4 million, we had in January 1790, still active in American politics, George Washington, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, and John Jay. Today, the population is more than 320 million, yet we would all be hard-pressed. I can understand why people kind of imagine that it's all been a fall from grace since there. And I think the show does show the extraordinary achievements of this generation. We won a war, we defeated the British military, which was the greatest military machine of the 18th century, wrote a constitution that Washington, Hamilton, Franklin thought maybe it would last 20 years. It's lasted more than 200 years now, and created a federal government that has also stood the test of time. But it's not the whole story, and I'm glad that Lynn, just didn't engage in that kind of hagiography, because what the show also demonstrates is that this was an era that, however great the characters and however extraordinary the achievements, it was already malicious and partisan, and a lot of things that disturb us now, unfortunately, go back to the very beginning. As you know from the show, from the book, the Mariah Reynolds scandal was exposed in the press just a couple of years after Hamilton left as Treasury Secretary. Jefferson's relationship with Sally Hemings was exposed in the press during Jefferson's first term as president. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. So I'd like to show that I think that it comes up with really kind of a very balanced and very complex view of the period as one of extraordinary people and extraordinary achievements, and yet at the same time they were flawed, and there also are some problems that still dog us in American politics today. Anyway, as you can tell, I don't want to go on. I feel enormously lucky. I feel like the luckiest writer in town, if not the world at the moment, because of my involvement with this extraordinary show. I feel like I'm the proud papa of it, except Lin-Manuel Miranda's father sometimes corrects me. I say that. But I feel especially lucky tonight to be here with this wonderful crowd and to have had this magnificent tribute. Thank you so much.